Alright, so this is going to be part two. So I went through the timeline in the previous video. I think it's still uploading right now. But, ooh. So this is the interesting part that links J.D. Salinger, who was in the CIC, over to some of the Nazis who were imported with information gathered by the CIC, by the CIA. And we all know Werner von Braun, NASA, all that type of stuff. But there's another guy, Otto von Bolschwing. And this is a picture of Otto von Bolschwing, who was a Nazi, and he actually ended up moving to the area, which would later become Silicon Valley. And he had a lot of business ties to Silicon Valley. So it's just very interesting. This is legitimate history, and the one thing I kind of notice about like a lot of like researchers or conspiracy people online is they never really want to point to the fact that like Nazis were the ones like doing a lot of this crazy stuff. They always want to blame like, oh, it's the social justice warriors, it's the liberals, it's all this type of stuff. No, actually, it was Nazis were sprinkled in there quite liberally, actually. But so this is the last point in the timeline. So March 1969, Otto von Bolschwing got a job in high technology. He was retained as an international business consultant by TCI, the Sacramento firm. The company planned to commercialize on technology development in Silicon Valley and used a few years earlier to monitor troop movements in 1967 Arab-Israeli war. So basically his company, they took military software to track troop movements in the, interestingly, if you look at all my videos, what I'm talking about, Arab-Israeli war. So GPS. He helped to make GPS, this former Nazi. And didn't make it, but capitalize on it. So, according to the firm's founder, Oswald S. Williams, TCI subsidiaries in Palo Alto, California, and Mountain View, California, Advanced Information Systems and International Imaging Systems were developing a high-volume computer network for business and a navigation system for oil tankers using satellite communications, Williams said. Early GPS. So, just kind of summary. So, in the last video, I was talking about J.D. Salinger and the Nazis. He was in the CIC, Counterintelligence Command. Everybody knows he had like a mental breakdown. In this book by Olson, there's a lot of kind of fishy things, even about Salinger himself, but it really paints a picture of actually just kind of like an aspiring young man trying to be a writer who was a lowly corporal who wanted to be an officer but couldn't, and he ends up actually being a Nazi hunter. But he actually becomes jaded by the fact that he realizes that the CIC is probably being used by the OSS, i.e. the CIA, and they're using their case files that they pull in the CIC to actually recruit Nazis. And you just have to watch the other video, the part one of legit history, J.D. Salinger, I think Nazi Silicon Valley that I just did. So one of those Nazis who was important to the United States was this guy, like I said, Otto von Bolschwing. And as you can see, that's the CIA. That's the SS. That's Nazi Germany. Lightning bolts. Nazi. CIA. And he was a part of Reinhard Gellen's intelligence agency. And Reinhard Gellen was pretty much Hitler's CIA chief. But he had a lot of information on the Russians, which later in the 1990s proved to be false. It was bogus. He just pretty much sold himself to Allen Dulles, who was racist, just like Patton was racist. He sold his services to the CIA, but a lot of these guys in the Gellen organization and a lot of these former Nazis, what I'm going to be talking about, it just wasn't Operation Paperclip. It was also setting up cocaine cartels. It was also setting up Silicon Valley, and not strongly, but they were there. So like I was saying, all this stuff is, California. Uh, for example, the Aryan Brotherhood, I think, has roots in San Quentin prison. So you have some Nazi elements over here by the CIA. Then all of a sudden, in the prison system during the MK Ultra years, you start seeing all of these racial groups start to pop up, helter skelterish type stuff, almost to kind of like play this dialectic game on the public that like some Charles Manson thing was going down. But see, I'm sounding conspiracy theorist, right? But I'm just saying, it's a lot of weird coincidences. A lot of weird stuff went down in San Francisco. I mean, so we have this Bolshwing guy, which I'm going to talk about, and his connections to Silicon Valley, which I learned, like I said, through J.D. Salinger's research that I was doing by myself. Um, but San Francisco, think about it: Bohemian Grove. We all know MK Ultra. We know Stanford Research Institute, the Stanford Prison Experiments. The Esalen Institute is not far away from there. The Esalen Institute hosted people from Julian and Aldous Huxley, so I think Ray Bradbury, I forget a lot, Terrence McKenna, the psychonaut guy. Um, Gestalt psychology, all this type of stuff, and it's just like a lot of stuff was going down in San Francisco in this counterculture movement, almost as if it was like being beta tested. It was being beta tested for the future, almost. But then also in the Southern California sphere, you have Jack Parsons with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which has links to NASA. You also have Howard Hughes and all his corporations. And I'm going to go into some detail about that. But Howard Hughes, he ends up moving to Las Vegas. He pretty much cleaned up Las Vegas. How did he clean it up? Well, he had deep state ties. He was like the deep state industrialist guy who made shit happen. He owned like TWA airplanes and stuff like that. Hollywood is down there. Pornography is down there. All these honeypot operations and traps down there. But also, what you start to notice, since we're talking about Nazis and Nazi hunting, is that Southern California was a haven for neo Nazis. Almost as if they were like the spoiled kids of the engineering elite nerd right wing Reagan class of the John Birch Society of like Orange County, who just hung out and just like assaulted people at Huntington Beach or something. Like why are they always popping up near military industrial complex areas? Well, our history seems to show that our military and our intelligence agency recruited Nazis. Maybe they were involved in setting up some neo-Nazi groups themselves. It's plausible. Hell's Angels, all that type of stuff is down there. I think they kind of from maybe it's like Fresno area or whatnot. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to bikers or nothing like that, but I'm just saying it's just fascinating history. And there's a connection between Aryan Brotherhoods and bikers. What do? They traffic guns and drugs. What did I just say? When it came to South America, you had Nazis down there having set up cocaine cartels. So you start to see the spider web start to form. How intelligence agencies really operate the world is kind of like they create, infiltrate, control, and manage black markets. They control the spider web. They're the queen spider in the middle, and they do a lot of dirty stuff. And it's not just neo Nazis. It's also black street gangs. It's arguably probably even cartels. This is how the world works. But what the purpose of this video is to kind of follow off where I started with that timeline. So let's talk about Otto von Bolshwing. What do we got here? So I wrote this on my blog, and this is section 8 of this paper I wrote called Barbie, Scorsese, Gellin, CIA, Silicon Valley Tech, Drug Markets, and ... the Pelosi and Newman families, or Newsom families. Gary Newsom, Nancy Pelosi. Who does she represent? She represents Silicon Valley area, Marin County, all that. And we're going to learn that she has some connections by proxy to good old Otto von Bolschwing, CIA Gehlen organization operative. So I think it cut off some stuff here. So this is about Franz Barbie, or Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon. So the BND under code name Alder Eagle and the registration number B43118. His initial monthly salary was 500 Deutschmarks. Was transferred in May 1966 to an account of the Chartered Bank of London in San Francisco. Chartered Bank of London in San Francisco. So in my other video, I talked about how a British lawyer helped get Otto Skorzeny off the hook. But then now we're finding that Otto von Bolschwing is in San Francisco, but Klaus Barbie has a bank account at a British bank in San Francisco. Ooh, boy. So during his time with the BND, he actually worked for the intelligence agency in West Germany that the CIA helped to create. Barbie made at least 35 reports to the BND headquarters in Pulauk. Further, Klaus Barbie, according to Wolf 2001, stated that in 1947, Barbie was recruited by an agent of the 66th Detachment of the United States Military Counterintelligence, and the CIC asserted that Barbie knew too much about the network of spies the CIC had planted in various European communist nations, and were suspicious of communist influences within the French government. But their protection of Barbie may have been as much to avoid the embarrassment of having recruited him in the first place. So they were trying to cover their tracks, but they were recruiting their old SS buddies into the mix. And CIC, Salinger, Henry Kissinger. This is wild stuff. J.D. Salinger and the Nazis. I'm a little tired. But so Barbie was recruited by the DNB, which is the Gehlen organization of Reinhard Gehlen, and Barbie helping set up what would grow into the cocaine industry of the 1980s, had a bank account at the Chartered Bank of London in San Francisco, which was where Otto von Bolschwing had his technology offices, friends to the Newsom family, who were related to the Pelosi family, and we know Otto von Bolschwing had offices in Sacramento, where Ronald Reagan was governor, and Reagan's secretary, the future ambassador to Austria, was Helene von Dahm, an investor in Bolschwing's TCI Corporation. Supposedly, she did translation work for Otto. That's some crazy stuff. So this is a photo of Reagan's secretary, Helene von Dahm. She's translating work for a former Nazi and investing in his early Silicon Valley company. Like, Ronald Reagan probably didn't know about that. And where is Ronald Reagan popular at? Ronald Reagan was popular in Orange County, Southern California. What was Southern California becoming known for? Neo-Nazis. What was happening in Southern California? Aerospace industry. What also has happened there? Hollywood. So you have this cross juncture between Hollywood, the military complex, aerospace, but then you also have this culture, this sort of like viral culture of this neo-Nazism popping up as well. Modify that by some biker gangs, CIA gets involved. Next thing you know, you got a drug running operation all the way up the West Coast, all the way across I-5, all the way across I-20, all the way to the East Coast, all the way to Florida. And the Gehlen organization was in Florida as well. And Florida was known for racial abuse, cop violence, all this type of stuff, because the LAPD was even involved in a lot of this Ronald Reagan, Iran-Contra sort of paramilitary type stuff with their whole red squads and everything when they were kind of snooping on political dissidents and everything. This happened in our country. So for people to say that like systemic injustice doesn't happen, I'm sorry, you just got to just read the history, and don't read the history that you just want to read. Read the history that makes you uncomfortable. This is a photo of Reinhard Gehlen. He was a Nazi, and he had affiliations with, dun, 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 God bless America, with the United States. Oh, look at this guy, Klaus Barbie. What was he, the Butcher of Lyon? And to add insult to injury, he never got in trouble, and he died in Lyon, France. Like, what? Like, just letting these people off the hook. Crimes against humanity. So this isn't a conspiracy, but Reagan and Nixon of the neoconservative movement, which, as I said in previous videos, the neoconservative movement is actually traces its roots in, I think it's like some Jewish editorial, as having roots in Judaism, which brings back to this book, Hitler's Jewish Soldiers. Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State during the Cold War. We don't really think that he knew that the CIA had Nazis. So it kind of calls into question a lot of what we're kind of being told and what we're being taught. You know, so for people out there going about with all these hate groups and stuff like that, like maybe you should just kind of read some more of the history of what it is you believe in, because maybe you were manufactured to be a specific way. So Reagan and Nixon were members of Bohemian Grove, you know, and I know you bring up that term. I don't care about Alex Jones. I don't care about that guy. But that's a real thing. So then you had, so we, then also this kind of connects back to Iran Contra, yada yada. So let me see here. I'm just going to read what I wrote. So despite its confusing operations can be summarized as being a drug dealing operation to create slush funds via international banks such as the BCCI Bank and other banks in London, Luxembourg, i.e. the House of Luxembourg, which has ties to the House of Malta, the Knights of Malta, a Catholic order, insinuating a link to the Vatican, but also the American Knights of Malta. A particular Knight of Malta was J. Peter Grace. J. Peter Grace ran Grace Company. Grace Company is still in existence today. You can buy stock in it. It's a chemical and industrialist company, and they made their fortune in South America on all things on guano. That's how they got started. But they eventually just became these sort of powerful American industrialists, kind of running things behind the scenes, just like the Hunt family and all these other people. So let me see here. So the Knights of Malta. In Switzerland to buy arms via the Saudis. So Adnan Khashoggi. Already talked about all that stuff in previous videos. So I'm not going to go too much into there. Just a little more speculation. But anyways, I have it on my computer, so that's where I'm going to read it. But I put this photo from Lethal Weapon in there with Gary Busey, because that kind of represents what I'm talking about, like these right-wing post-military, you know, Eric Prince type mercenaries, essentially, who are kind of fighting for freedom, but they're really just drug dealers and gun runners and just doing some crazy hardcore stuff, all for democracy. Hardcore. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read off some of these things about these links between Otto von Bolschwing and also the Silicon Valley connections. So what do we got here? So this is on my just notes. Like, you know, I just blog just to kind of take notes. You know, it's just kind of, you know, at work it kind of switches up things and everything. Like I said, I hope everybody's having a good day and whatnot. But where are we at? Where we at? So understanding TCI, the Trans International Computer Investment Corporation, ties to Nazis, the CIA, and and many still existing companies in industrials, chemicals, and the aerospace defense industry. So TCI Corporation is one of the earliest companies to be involved in the military transfer of technology to private business via relationships such as joint ventures, which helped to lay the foundation for Silicon Valley. TCI Corporation essentially was involved in GPS, geospatial positioning systems, and the internet, but associated companies via Otto von Bolschwing's business ties span specialties such as aerial cameras, lunar and outer orbit cameras, such as those made by the Fairchild Corporation, ITT's vast conglomerate ties, Spicer Pharmaceuticals, i.e. Viagra, Cabot Corporation, for carbon materials, but also these companies' ties linked to what was going on in Silicon Valley via NASA. But then NASA also had ties, as we know, to the Jet Propulsion Lab of who? Jack Parsons. Who was Jack Parsons connected to? Aleister Crowley. What were they all engaged in? Sex orgies and sex magic and all that type of stuff. And it sounds goofy, but just watch the film like L.A. Confidential. It kind of paints a picture of the more shadowy side of things. And what's interesting is within those sex circles, right? Honestly, this is just my personal opinion. This is where the Black Dahlia murder actually comes into play here, because George Hodel, the suspected person who actually did the Black Dahlia murder, you know, which was art. There's no question that it was inspired by the artist Man Ray, and his art piece, The Minotaur. You should just look up Man Ray, The Minotaur. You'll see, and then look up Black Dahlia. You'll see. Uh, this same sort of sex libertine circle is where George Hodel, Man Ray, and John Huston, the famous actor, the father of Angelica Huston, were all kind of, sowing their wild oats. But the thing about George Hodel is, like I said, this all kind of connects back to the whole Silicon Valley thing. But I just have to put this in here, is that George Hodel was obsessed with S&M. So he was in art. So he wanted to explore the darker artistic sides of S&M. And honestly, he got it with the Black Dahlia murder, but he was never charged for it. And the interesting thing, not that it matters, but George Hodel was Jewish, and also Man Ray was Russian Jewish. Not that that matters, but like I said though too, it kind of traces back to what I'm talking about with this book. Like, there's just a lot more different things that we know behind the scenes, like, because we typically think of, I grew up, I believe the Holocaust, that definitely happened. I support Israel, but I remember growing up in the era where the Holocaust was still fresh on people's minds, even in the 80s and the early 90s. Like, we were taught that in school. We were straight up taught that in school. I don't know if they teach it in school anymore. But so I knew that that was a very taboo subject to ever question. But as I get older, it happened. I'm not denying that it happened. But what I'm saying is that there's just a lot more shadowy stuff behind the scenes. And it's just kind of like there's just one particular group you can't really talk about. And even though they're kind of involved, sometimes associating with people you wouldn't expect them of associating with, i.e., the people who tried to exterminate them. But for what? Political reasons? Or maybe it just calls the whole reality into question. But about George Hodel and the Black Dahlia murder, and what I was saying, I connected him to Jack Parsons via NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which relates back to Otto von Bolschwing and his aerospace ties and whatnot, is that George Hodel arguably is the Black Dahlia murderer, but John Huston was in those circles too. And John Huston, interestingly, what does he star in? What is he famous? What is one of his famous movies? Chinatown with Jack Nicholson. I'm sorry. So you're telling me that So he plays a character who's a pedophile on his daughter, but in real life he was going to sex parties hosted by George Hodel, in which George Hodel in real life was actually brought to court by his daughter because his daughter actually claimed that her father was passing her around at parties, being frolicked by people like Man Ray and John Huston. Irony that he would play a role like that. And guess what? Who directed Chinatown? Roman Polanski. What is he known for? He had sex with a minor, had to flee the country. I don't think he's ever been back to the United States. People still hold him in high regard, you know? And, it's kind of like, what's his ancestry? And like I said, I'm not trying to promote hate or nothing. But the thing about it though too is obviously who was Roman Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate. What happened to her? Charles Manson, the Manson family. Charles Manson, talk about helter skelter, his brain fried out on acid. Where did he get the acid from? Where did he get all that acid from? He was in the prison system. Even was his Huey of the Black Panthers went to prison. He comes out of prison all coked out of his mind. And what is he reading? He's reading the communists. He's reading Mao's Red Book. It's almost like what was going on in the prison systems, particularly in California, in the South and whatnot. Arguably, probably could have been some MK Ultra type stuff. Frying these guys' brains with drugs as lab rats. And then the next thing you know, they get out in a counterculture who's all far out, man. You sound cool. Like, right on, man. And he's like, yeah, come join my cult. Yeah, man. I'm serious. Like, this stuff was going down. And under the auspices of our own government. But like I'm saying, like I seem like I'm all over the place here, but I'm not. Like it's all connected. It's all part of this technocracy experiment sort of operation. But it has like these power centers, like Los Angeles, the SoCal complex, and San Francisco or whatnot. Like they serve a purpose. Every single city serves a purpose, kind of in the matrix. Some are logistic cities, some are business finance cities, some are administration government cities. Others are high technology cities. Others are pornography and Hollywood entertainment TV cities. It's just what they do. They specialize, but there's all like an agenda at the top. But about Otto von, so let me finish off that whole Black Dahlia thing. So, like I'm saying, from Otto von Bolschwing, some of his investors through TCI Corporation had aerospace connections. Some of those aerospace connections tie back to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory was arguably founded by Jack Parsons, who was an occultist and a rocket scientist. He has a crater on the dark side of the moon named after him. He was associated with Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was pretty much the guru of counterculture. The Doors, the Beatles, all this type of stuff, all this sort of far out man type stuff. Orgies, drugs, and through Jack Parsons and Crowley, it illuminates a sort of libertine culture in the mountain areas, kind of surrounding like the Laurel Canyon, so that people know about that in conspiracy circles. You also know about the Santa Monica. What's also in Santa Monica? The Rand Corporation. The Rand Corporation, like Albert Wohlstetter, who was a controversial guy, kind of Doctor Strangelove level people. That's in Santa Monica. That has an office there. But it illuminated this kind of light of all these orgies and stuff, and this sex magic stuff, and underage sex, and maybe even snuff. Crazy people taking it to the next level because they could, because they had power. Government connections, billionaires, Hollywood actors, cleaner, fixers, you know. But that's just so crazy. From Otto von Bolschwing to Jack Parsons to Crowley, the sex magic scene to George Hodel, Man Ray, John Huston, Angelica Huston. John Huston stars in Chinatown by Roman Polanski. Angelica Huston got questioned by the police for what she knew about the underage sex scandal with Roman Polanski. And I think she got busted for cocaine. Have you ever seen the movie Choke? Choke, I think. I forget the actor's name, but it's by the book by the guy who wrote Fight Club, Chuck Palahniuk or Palachuk. But she plays a mother who does what? She kidnaps a kid and raises him as her own. She also stars in what? The Witches. What is The Witches about? The Witches is about an orphanage agency posing, but is really like a coven of witches who like eat kids. So I'm starting to go like into the weird space. So I'm gonna stop there. But the thing about George Hodel, before I keep going on about Otto von Bolschwing, J.D. Salinger, CIC, Silicon Valley, is that this connects to some other research I did as well. Is that it connects to the Philippines. So when George Hodel left the United States because people were suspicious, even though he wasn't tried or convicted of the Black Dahlia murder of Elizabeth Short, um, he ends up actually working for the United Nations after World War II. And he was a trained doctor, by the way. That's what you need to know. He was a trained doctor with a high IQ working in China. What's going on in China at that time? John Birch, his death, later the rise of the John Birch Society. You also have John K. Singlob over there as an observer for the OSS, the CIA, observing the Chinese Revolution versus Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong. Where's Mao Zedong from? He was a bookkeeper at a Yale owned, you can think of it as like a YMCA, and all of a sudden he gets elevated to support the Marxist guerrillas against Chiang Kai-shek because the United States probably didn't want a nationalist, independent China to begin with, and Mao was their boy because he was a bookkeeper at a Yale-owned sort of like youth organization. Where was that? Why was Yale in China? Yale went far back into China to the era of old China trade. You can look that up, old China trade. Old China trade happened after the Revolutionary War, early 1800s, as America's pretty much like getting on its feet. You know, we're trekking, we're moving out west. John Jacob Astor, Astoria, Oregon, fur trapping, oil is kind of be starting to kind of catch a thing over kerosene. You know, it's almost like Herman Melville days of Moby Dick. You know, people still hunted whales for their blubber and their fat for kerosene and oil and stuff. Then people were becoming millionaires back then. But the old China trade was based out of Salem, Massachusetts. What do you think of when you think about Salem, Massachusetts? I just won't even say it. You already know. But once these families connected to the old China trade were people like the Russell family and what's his name? William Huntington Russell. What did he find? Skull and Bones at Yale. Skull and Bones at Yale University. The rich kid of a heroin family, because that's what old China trade did. All those, the Boston Brahmin is what they called them, or the New York Knickerbockers, the Virginia old gentry classes and all that. They were merchants. They had trade in Turkey. They had trade all the way in China, just like the Brits, all the way in China. And what were they doing? They were shipping opium back to the United States. And the Chinese got so fed up with it. This is what led to the Boxer Rebellion, because there were so many heroin addicts in China that the conservative Chinese got fed up with it. And they kicked the British out. And where did they go? They went to Hong Kong. And the Americans, now cut out of the heroin trade, had to figure out a new way to smuggle. So they create all these Yale houses in China, which were arguably probably just heroin smuggling routes to keep up their fortunes. So Skull and Bones comes from that heritage. Yale University comes from that heritage. There still is a China Yale organization. Mao Zedong was a part of it. And the crazy thing too is one of the families who profited from that were not only the Russell family. I think you also had the Cabot family. It's like one of our one of our presidents. You also had the Forbes family, and not necessarily. I don't think the Forbes family is like Forbes magazine family, but Forbes as in John Forbes Kerry, Secretary of State, former Secretary of State and former presidential runner. See how I'm just flowing here? I'm just flowing. Like it's crazy. And where did John Kerry fight at? He fought in the Vietnam War. What was going on during the Vietnam War? American gangster shit. The Golden Triangle. Smuggling heroin back in coffins and airplanes, and for what? For who? Who was profiting from that? It wasn't just, Frank Lucas or whatnot, Denzel Washington's character. It was probably the CIA too. Slush funds. Junkies helped to win the Cold War. Crackheads, and I don't mean to say that in a shameful way, as if like, these people have addictions. I'm not making fun of them. I'm not, you know, but crack addicts helped to win the Cold War because their profits helped to buy guns to fund revolutions elsewhere. And this is an operation that goes way back. So I'm talking about, just remember where I started from. JD Salinger, CIC, OSS, SSUs, spies, Nazis, Jews, the WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant upper class, uh, drug running, gun running, funding operations, uh, funding technology, importing scientists who would help to lay the groundwork of GPS satellite systems that are all on our phones right now tracking us. Cell phones, aerospace, space travel, and then you start to see more of the sexual underbelly to it with orgies, child abuse, rackets, maybe holding people's kids hostages if they fail their missions and stuff like that. This is some crazy shit. True detective level stuff. And it's all happening right in our faces, like we just saw with Epstein and all this type of stuff. So man, and I can even go farther. Like let's start off with China again. Uh, so China, Mao, Chiang Kai-shek. We turn on Chiang Kai-shek because we don't want an independent China, really, like a nationalist and stuff like that, to be kind of a thorn. Because we probably even knew back then if China ever reached the potential of the United States, they would be a problem. What's the best way to keep that problem? You promote communism to keep its people in control. Starve them to death. Do whatever you want. We don't care what you do, Mao. You can have 1,000 wives that you bang on the reg. It doesn't matter to us. Just keep your people in control. And also, they helped to hedge Russia because China and Russia, they still had their beefs during the Cold War too. They never linked up in the Cold War. Really, I mean, officially, they might have funded some revolutions together. They might have bought weapons, but you're talking about two prideful countries there. And also, when I'm talking about heroin in the Golden Triangle, Vietnam, John Kerry, Al Gore, I'm not saying that they were involved, but I'm just saying like that stuff was going on while they were there, and they're obviously like higher ranking people. When it comes to that, like you can also go to Afghanistan. That's where we get a lot of the heroin from in the United States, in Europe, or whatnot. Who used to own Afghanistan? The British. British Pakistan, Pakistan, India, parts of Afghanistan, that was all owned by Britain and whatnot. And what was the cash crop of the mystical land of illumination, Nafiristan, and all that type of stuff, or Nuristan, one of the provinces of Afghanistan? It was heroin, poppy seeds. Aleister Crowley was a junkie. A lot of rock stars were junkies. Aleister Crowley arguably was a British intelligence asset. This is how the world runs. And it's easy to be like, oh, these people were just misunderstood, man. They were just far thinking. I don't know. Was it Jim Morrison, his dad, Gulf of Tonkin incident? He was the admiral at that got us into the war. Read the lyrics of try to understand the lyrics of the Doors' famous song "The End," which is in the opening sequence of Apocalypse Now, which is a very illuminating movie in and of itself, because they're basically just talking about Black Ops hit people in Vietnam. Phoenix Brigade shit. What was Phoenix? What was the Phoenix program? Where do we know that from in pop culture? Lethal Weapon, which is funny because Riggs was in the Phoenix program, and I remember this as a kid. Because I was a military brat. I knew about Vietnam stuff. I was always kind of like one of the Frog brothers from Lost Boys. Just into action and comics and stuff like that. And Riggs was in the Phoenix program. What was the Phoenix program, arguably? Training hardcore killers who were desensitized. And some people speculate that it was actually the military's version of MK Ultra to create the perfect desensitized soldier. What happens after Vietnam ends in the 70s? What happens? Social phenomenon. What happens? Serial killers. The rise of the serial killer starts to happen as a social phenomenon. What was going on during those times? You had a lot of drugs, you had a lot of unemployment, you had austerity and inflation when we got off the gold standard, you had the oil crisis, you had a very libertine lax culture where people hitchhiked and far out, man, whatever. Just, yeah, man, that old guy over there, he's cool, man. He has some dope, man. Let's go over there. Let's go smoke in his basement, man. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Crazy shit going down, man. Where innocence and darkness kind of corresponded was like the 70s, the end of innocence. Some people arguably say that when Sharon Tate passed away, it was the end of innocence. Like I said, after Vietnam, what happens? You have all these hardened people with killer skills, many hooked on drugs, many involved in the black market drug rings. If you're involved in those drug rings, who's to say you're not involved in trafficking people, kids? You also had a very homophobic era while all of this libertine stuff was interestingly happening. So a lot of these killers, I'm not a psychologist, but a lot of them had latent sexual sort of issues. They're either closeted, suppressed homosexuals for their time, and they didn't know how to get out the closet and express themselves. Some of them were military with maybe control issues, particularly over women, particularly as female liberation was happening. They couldn't handle it. So if you have no skills, you were used to raping and killing Vietnam women. Now you're a truck driver driving across the United States. Doesn't sound like a good combination. Like I said, I'm just flowing here. I'm just flowing because you can start from one and kind of go to the next. And you can say that this is all not connected, but we're seeing it right now in current day, particularly the Jeffrey Epstein type stuff, like modeling agencies as front companies for human trafficking. It sounds like Zoolander from hell. It sounds like a Bret Easton Ellis book, the guy who wrote American Psycho. He wrote a book called Glamorama. And I think he actually sued Ben Stiller because I think Zoolander's plot is actually based in part on Glamorama, supposedly. I don't doubt it, though, if you just read the plot of it. And it's crazy, man. And I said it. I started this conversation by talking about Catcher in the Rye. Even J.D. Salinger himself had a thing for younger women throughout his life. He married very young women when he was an old man. Nabokov, Lolita. I mean, y'all, you know what that word is. Something going on in these sort of intel, deep state type things kind of going on, you know? And it really seems like it came to a head in the 1980s. That's the era of the missing kid on the milk carton, you know? This is the era that produced America's Most Wanted and everything like that, you know, like very uncomfortable stuff. Like, what was going on? Why were people so crazy? Well, they didn't have the technology to track them, for one, is a theory. But at the same time, it's like all of these forces kind of all meshed and it kind of exploded, really, even though they tried to sweep it under the rug with kind of Ronald Reagan's fake nostalgia and like make America great again stuff, even though Ronald Reagan was in on all this stuff too. Bohemian Grove, Iran Contra. So he knows. So people in his kitchen cabinet knew that crack was being sold to people. So, oh, I'm gonna get tough on drugs and I'm gonna throw all these people in drugs. Meanwhile, their slush funds are going to buy arms to free hostages or to fund Contras who are over there skinning people alive in Nicaragua for freedom. Hardcore stuff. And the sad truth about Donald Trump, in my opinion, is he's just a manifestation of that all over again. For a American public who felt very vulnerable and scared to a changing world because of the failures of things like globalism. I'm not saying that globalism is bad, but it has a lot of problems. And that's when you get a person like Donald Trump into power. And Donald Trump is basically nothing more than just like a knockoff brand Ronald Reagan for baby boomers who saw the debut of Top Gun in 1980 whatever, as if that's like the only thing that holds a country together. The only thing that can fix a country is just like nostalgia and, you know, knee slapping good old boy humor or whatnot. Nah, no, like this is some deep stuff, you know. And but you gotta talk about it because it happened. Pretending the devil doesn't exist doesn't mean he doesn't exist, is that old saying, you know. And I don't buy no QAnon crap either and all that because they're probably in on it too. Like the whole, that's what I'm saying, all these neo Nazis and bikers or whatnot, connections and stuff like that to drug running probably connects to FBI, CIA, ATF, all this type of stuff, you know, to really make me think that QAnon isn't some created dialectic to just get people to just pretend like they're patriots and whatnot when really they're just being controlled by the same state apparatus. Did Donald Trump get rid of the Patriot Act? NSA surveillance state? No. So who are you fooling? Who are you fooling? So, but anyway, so back to Bolshwing. So TCI Corporation, there's a website called Open Corporates, and I found their old transcripts, and they were incorporated in 1969, May 15th, 1969. La, 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 la. They have an active agent. Company number was 713126. They were a corporation based out of the jurisdiction of Delaware. Why is that important? Delaware Corporation. So if you're a corporation franchised in Delaware, you don't have to pay income taxes. Why? It's some weird rule. Like Delaware, as this tiny state that nobody looks at, is the biggest tax haven within the United States of America. So what companies do is, as a Delaware corporation, and it's kind of clever in an evil genius way, is you basically just open a PO box in Delaware. You set up your company there. you give that mailbox rights to like the trademark, the name, the company, but you operate outside of that state. So you only have to pay sales state income tax, I'm sorry, to the state of Delaware, but they don't have an income tax. They have a franchise fee or franchise tax. So you just pay a flat rate just to exist in Delaware without existing in Delaware, and all you have to do is show up and check the mailbox. That's how Delaware Corporation works. So TCI Corporation was a Delaware tax fraud company to begin with, but it's illegal. It's America. It's all sorts of crazy stuff. So we know that Silicon Valley's close relationship with Stanford. We also know that Stanford had some kooky programs like Operation Stargate, which is actually them actually trying to do like remote viewing and spoon bending. It sounds nuts, but this happened under Ronald Reagan's watch. So when you watch shows like Stranger Things or whatnot, so yeah, it's nostalgic and it's awesome and it reminds us of E.T. and Firestarter and all these type of things. But really, a lot of this stuff was actually going on. Esalen Institute. Okay, let me see here. Okay, so in 1981, Pete Carey of the San Jose Mercury News, first quote I had, in December 1953, von Bolschwing applied to immigrate to the United States, and on February 2nd, 1954, he arrived in this country. After obtaining several menial jobs, he became a citizen in 1959, and his career took a sudden upward turn. He became an assistant to the director of international marketing at Werner Lambert Pharmaceutical Company, developing close ties to the company's president, the late Elmer Bobst, and its honorary board chairman, former New Jersey Governor Alfred Driscoll, according to close associates. By the mid-1960s, von Bolschwing had become an executive with Cabot Manufacturing. Cabot Manufacturing, Cabot family, that's a presidential family. As chief financial officer of its German subsidiary, he helped develop a 50 million carbon black operation for Cabot in Germany. So carbon black is kind of like this composite sort of coal offshoot type thing or whatnot, or carbon offshoot they use for like materials, and it's like plastics almost. You can think about it that way. Similar to it, at least. So von Bolschwing becomes the chief financial officer for Cabot Manufacturing to set up their German business. That sounds very familiar to ITT Corporation. ITT Corporation, like I said, I said this in my previous video, American company, they helped to manufacture Nazi aircraft and won a lawsuit against the United States government because our GIs bombed their plant. You're not telling me this is some next level stuff they didn't realize was going to happen in World War II? To set up the Cold War, probably for just energy prices and control of the world and stuff. So the deal was financed through Thomas Franzioli, senior vice president of the First Bank of Boston. Franzioli recalls that von Bolschwing then branched out on his own. Number 5. In March 1967, von Bolschwing got a job in high technology. He was retained as an international business consultant by TCI, the Sacramento firm. The company planned to commercialize on technology developed in Silicon Valley and used a few years earlier to monitor troop movements in the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, according to the firm's founder, Oswald S. Williams. TCI subsidiaries in Palo Alto and Mountain View, Advanced Information Systems, and International Imaging Systems were developing a high-volume computer network for business. High-volume computer network, internet, for business, and a navigation system for oil tankers using satellite communications, GPS, internet, cell phones, all this. So his contacts include officials of the German branch of Chase Manhattan Bank and an owner of the Berlin Handels Gesellschaft in Frankfurt, one of Europe's largest banks. TCI's high-powered directors was one of John Paul Getty Jr. of Getty Oil. Getty Oil, what are they known for? They opened up Saudi Arabia oil wells. Power, deep state. So, John Paul Getty's Jr., son of the oil billionaire, thought enough of von Bolschwing to make him the firm's president in 1970. He seems like a very polite and cultured person, said Walter F. Leverton, former vice president of satellite systems of the Aerospace Corp. Leverton sat on TCI board. Oh, that von Bolschwing, he's a nice guy, you know. He has a dog named Adolf, but you know, he's kind of cool, you know. He he cooks. He knows how to cook, you know. He cooks a mean steak. Good old Otto. So let me see here. So Justice Newsom, the current governor's dad, Justice Newsom, who traveled as a TCI attorney with von Bolschwing in Europe in 1969 and 70, and said von Bolschwing alluded to wartime work for the Americans. So they're getting cozy, hey, kicking it and stuff like that. Yeah, man, he starts asking them questions. Hey, man, so what's up, man? Like, what were you doing during the war and stuff like that? Oh, me, no, I don't know. I was translating for the Americans and shit and killing Jews. So let me see here. So Emmanuel Fentinakis, Greek name, of Fairchild Corp. He was the senior vice president, who had resigned in international telephone and telegraph vice president. So Mr. Emmanuel Fentinakis, who was the senior vice president of Fairchild, had resigned as the vice president of ITT to join TCI. And ITT is that company who I said was building German war machines as an American company. And they got off the hook. They didn't even get fined. They won money. They won U.S. taxpayer money. And this is what I'm saying. People are trying to say that like systemic injustice doesn't exist. Get out of here by just listening to this. Records and interviews with TCI officials indicate that Helene von Damme, President Reagan's Austrian-born deputy assistant, translated some German contracts for TCI and invested $1,000 in it while she was then Governor Reagan's secretary in Sacramento. So she has insider info and whatnot. Ronald Reagan probably knows that he's a damn Nazi. He don't care and stuff like that. Nazis, they hate commies, right? They're on our side. Good. Cool. Get out of here. In 1970, TCI ran into trouble with the Department of Corporations. Several major stockholders were syndicating its stock, selling it to small investors in Sacramento. The department corporation suspended trading in TCI stock in 1972. The Sacramento District Attorney's Office prosecuted several stockholders, calling it possibly the biggest stock fraud in California history. Damn. And guess what happened to Helene von Damme? Oh, she got promoted. She became the ambassador to Austria, Arnold Schwarzenegger country or whatnot. She got promoted. Woo! Getting deep. Getting deep. So number 9 in this paper that I wrote, analysis of business, corporation, and banking ties. Where are the companies now? Sounds like a game show. Ding, ding, ding. Where are the companies now? Warner Lambert, associated with Otto von Bolschwing, is now Pfizer, Viagra for your dick. Was an American pharmaceutical company formerly two separate entities. The first company was started in 1856 when William R. Warner founded a drugstore in Philadelphia. It always starts off so innocent and cute, doesn't it? So Warner went to invent a tablet coding process, gaining him a place in the Smithsonian Institute. Oh, smart guy. The second half of the name came from Jordan Wheat Lambert, founder of Lambert Pharmaceutical Company of St. Louis, famous for Listerine. He invented Listerine. Just the random shit you know. Hey, watch my videos. I'll up your Jeopardy game by a lot. Just give me a cut. That's all I ask. So the two companies merged in 1955 to form Warner Lambert. In February 2000, Pfizer bought Warner Lambert along with all of its subsidiary companies. Listerine, man. Man, we got pills. We got pills that make your boom boom stick stay hard. Pfizer. Oh, what are they worth? Revenue $53.6 billion. Dang. Don't you wish you had that? Next on the list of where are they now? We have Cabot Manufacturing. So let me peep this. So associated with Otto von Bolschwing, now Cabot Corporation, New York Stock Exchange symbol CBT. If you would like to join my conspiracy theory based investing fund, you can call me at any number, whatever. But is a chemical company specializing in carbon black inkjet colorants, Aqueous inkjet colorants, which are created in aerogels. So you're seeing a lot of chemical guys, a lot of chemical stuff here. It's just like it's just whew. But it was founded by Godfrey Lau Cabot, whose granddad was Samuel Cabot Jr., born 1784 to 1863, who was an American businessman in the early 20th century. China trade, heroin, Forbes family, John Kerry Forbes, the Russell family, William Huntington Russell, Skull and Bones, Yale, China, Mao. There you go. You start to see the spider web. So it's important to note that China trade was the opium trade. Uh, and families associated with this were the Forbes family, like I already said. Already talked about Skull and Bones. Interesting about Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is managed to this day by the Russell Trust, which is therefore managed by Brown Brothers Harriman and Co. And I have the hyperlink in this article. So Cabot specialized in carbon black, yada yada. So let me see here. So Cabot specialized in carbon black, which is mainly used as a reinforcing filler in tires and rubber products. So these are where all these rich people get their money from. It's not like, oh, I'm the new tech guy. It's really they own the means of production. Plastics, oils, polymers, stuff like that. I'm going to be right back. Ugh. All right, I'm back. So where we leave off. So Cabot, we were talking about Cabot, who were involved in the China trade, Skull and Bones, opium, heroin, China, Mao, baby, bro, does this stuff get deep? So Cabot specialized in carbon black, which is mainly used as a reinforcing filler in tires and other rubber products. In plastics, paints, and inks, carbon black is used as a color pigment. So it is a material produced by the incompatible combustion of what? Heavy petroleum, oil. See what I'm saying? So it's like you have the oil people, then you have the periphery industrialists who make money off of like the sort of residuals of petroleum. And what is the most famous residual of petroleum? Plastic. The people who invented plastic are so rich they're not even on Earth anymore. Probably like they're in another dimension at this point. These are the people who rule the world. So like I even wrote here, oil. Who owned oil? Rockefellers, Getty, Seven Sisters, i.e. oil is needed for most products, and that creates the industrial cabals. So when people think, oh, it's all about the oil and the gas, people just think about gasoline. No. Think about rubber. Think about, the materials needed to help, vulcanize the rubber. Think about plastics. Think about inks. All these type of things. Tarring for roofs. The potential of oil is just, it's never gonna go away. Like we might get off of oil as a combustion engine, but we're still gonna be using plastic. Cabot, what are they worth? Just 3.2 billion. Just kind of weak, really. That old money, just kind of they couldn't keep up. Busters. What is this? Okay, the Aerospace Corporation, non-profit, used to be called Ramo Woodbridge Corporation, TRW, associated with our boy Otto von Bolschwing. I just feel like I gotta show a picture of this guy again, just to paint more context. Otto von Bolschwing. Oh man, but it's just the Jews, man. They run the world, man. It can't be white people. It can't be what? Nah, man. It's the welfare queens and the blacks and the Hispanics. They're taking our jobs. Okay, all right. Sorry, shit. But it's the Jews. No, 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 no. So anyway, the Aerospace Corporation, the Ramo Woodbridge Corporation, associated with Otto von Bolschwing, is an American California nonprofit corporation that operates a federally funded research and development center, FFRDC, headquartered in El Segundo, California. This company was involved in the ICBM Atlas project. Damn. NASA Project Mercury on getting astronauts into space before Russia, but also the Gemini program coming before the famous Apollo mission. The Titan program with Martin Marietta, later Lockheed Martin, stock symbol LM, with the material-based department Martin Marietta Materials, stock symbol MLM, being spun off as his own company. So the corporation provided technical guidance and advice on all aspects of space missions to military, civil, and commercial customers. Granted, this is associated with Otto von Bolschwing. Granted, this is probably associated with Howard Hughes, i.e. the true Tony Stark. So the corporate, I already read that. So aerospace works closely with organizations such as the United States Air Force Space and Missile Systems Center, SMC, and the National Reconnaissance Office. That's actually one of the intel agencies you don't really hear about. You always hear about the the NSA, but you don't really hear about the NRO or the National Geospatial Observation administration and all those type of things. The NSA, I think they said, is to wiretapping. The other agencies are to photos. So to provide objective technical analyses and assessments for space programs that serve the national interest. Although SMC and NRO are the primary customers, aerospace also performs work for civil agencies such as international organizations and governments in national interest. The Aerospace Corporation traces roots to the Ramo Woodbridge Corporation, and the company was founded in 1901, and it lasted for more than a century until being acquired by Northrop Grumman, one of the top military defense contractors, in 2002. TRW worked with Hughes Aircraft, Howard Hughes, linking this to Howard Hughes. Overton 2030 stated that Bill Gates got his first break while only 15 debugging grid control software for TRW. And there you go, Microsoft, their stock symbol. So this company spawned a variety of corporations, including Pacific Semiconductors, the Aerospace Corporation, Bunker Ramo, and Experian credit reports from TRW, which is now called the Aerospace Corporation. Isn't that crazy? From credit reports to space. I mean, I'm not even trying to get conspiracy, but it's almost kind of like they already have the infrastructure for a damn social credit system. You cut in line today. You do not get to use your credits today. So it had an automotive business. So these are conglomerates. So it's just like their corporation with so many different departments going on. They would spin them off and whatnot and cover up stuff. But so its automotive businesses were sold off by Northrop Grumman as TRW Automotive, which is now a part of the ZF Friedrichshafen. TRW veterans were instrumental in the founding of corporations like SpaceX, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Make Me a Machine, Alphas, Betas, You're a Loser, okay. Follow my show. I'm voting for Trump. In summary, this company, not to be confused with the still existing Aerospace Corporation, still lives as TRW, owned by ZF Friedrichshafen, which is owned by the Zeppelin Foundation, Northrop Grumman, Goodrich Corporation, which was sold to the conglomerate mega corporation United Technologies Corporation, and the tire division was sold to Michelin, stock symbols UTX and SCA on the Euronext Paris. So you can't even buy their stock in the United States unless you have an account over there in Paris, which is just insane in itself. So Aerospace Corporation El Segundo, we got Lockheed Martin over here, whoop whoop, $53 billion. We got Experian in the house, $4.6 billion. They're based in Ireland, Dublin, Ireland. Why is that? Because Ireland is a tax haven now. And honestly, like I said, this all comes from the Aerospace Corporation, which was previously Rambo Woodridge Corporation. So we got all those. What are some other companies on who's associated with Otto von Bolschwing? Berliner Handelsgesellschaft. Berliner Handelsgesellschaft. Associated with Otto von Bolschwing, was a German industrial bank associated with the Nazis, and the Reichsmark, which after World War II merged Frankfurt Bank to create the still existing bank of BHF Bank, also known as Odo BHF Aktiengesellschaft in Frankfurt. Who else do we have on the list? Chase Manhattan Bank, Rockefellers, which is now owned by JP Morgan as JP Morgan Chase. New York Stock Exchange symbol JPM. We have the First Bank of Boston, which was acquired by no other than Bank of America. Oh, like there's no fighting this. Like we're talking about billions. How many billions? Like, am I even talking about anymore? Getty Oil, private company, is still in existence. Actually, technically, it's still in existence. And so Getty Oil, private company associated with Otto von Bolschwing, with roots back to John Paul Getty, who became rich by opening Saudi and Kuwaiti oil to the world. It is still around today, but it was sold in a historical court battle between Texaco and Pennzoil, with Pennzoil coming out on top. And Pennzoil is a subsidiary of Royal Dutch Shell. Damn. Now it operates mainly as gas stations in the northeast of the United States. A subsidiary, Getty Petroleum Marketing, was sold to Luke Oil in 2000, the second largest gas company, the second largest gas company, but this was sold to investment house Cambridge Securities LLC. Cambridge, what goes on in Cambridge? I don't know, just making spies. But the name of Getty Oil was at one point more recently owned by an Australian firm, Westerhout AG, run by Olaf Westerhout. Just you get lost up in this corporate stuff, man. Getty Oil, technically, it's just ran by Shell Oil now. This is interesting. On the list of who was associated with Otto von Bolschwing, ding, 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 Fairchild Corporation was an aerospace corporate company which was called Fairchild Hiller Corporation, which became Fairchild Industries before Fairchild Corporation. The company invented the aerial camera, such as the Fairchild F1 aerial camera. Also, the Fairchild Lunar Mapping Camera, also known as the metric camera for NASA. The camera was carried by Apollo 15, 16, 17 and took photos from lunar orbit throughout the missions. Over 7,000 individual frames were captured by the lunar mapping cameras, which resulted in the coverage of approximately 20% of the lunar surface. Fairchild Aircraft built the A-10 Thunderbolt, and today the company exists as Israeli-based Elbit Systems, Nasdaq symbol ESLT. Sherman Fairchild founded the company and his Fairchild Camera and Instrument Corporation. Semiconductor Division Company played a defining role in the development of Silicon Valley. He held over 30 patents for products ranging from silicon semiconductors to the 8mm home sound motion picture camera. Woo! Fairchild is also responsible for inventing the first synchronized camera, shutter, and flash, as well as developing new technologies for aerial cameras that were later used for Apollo missions. Fairchild Camera and Instrument Corporation Semiconductor Division is now known as ON Semiconductors, Nasdaq symbol ON. So you can, I'm tracing the family tree of the corporate hierarchy of this kind of deep state technocracy, I guess, if you want to call it. How much are they worth? 5.8 billion. Okay, I see you. Elbit Systems in Israel. Where are they based out of? Haifa, Israel. Worth 3.7 billion and on the up. Whew. Now we're about to go to this bad boy. On the list of who knows Otto von Bolschwing, the Nazi who helped fund Silicon Valley, who was pretty much brought into America with the CIC research, arguably by J.D. Salinger. And actually not J.D. Salinger, most likely Henry Kissinger. So International Telephone and Telegraph, associated with Otto von Bolschwing, is a conglomerate spanning multiple industries from telecommunication, night vision goggles, etc. Its brand, Excelis, was bought by Harris Corporation, which is now LG Harris. stock symbol LXH, which is the sixth largest defense contractor specializing in provider and produces C6ISR systems and products, wireless equipment, tactical radios, avionics and electronic systems, night vision equipment, in both terrestrial and spaceborne antennas for use in government, defense, and commercial sectors. They specialize in surveillance solutions, microwave weaponry. Ooh, damn, I'm getting scared, bro. I'm getting scared. I'm getting scared, bro. Over here talking about microwave weapons and shit, trying to turn people into popcorn. And electronic warfare. ITT spinoff from XLM is or ITT spinoff of Excellium Inc. Stock symbol XYL. So just look that up if you want to figure out the name. XYL is a large American water technology company enabling customers worldwide to transport, treat, test, and efficiently use water in public utility, residential, commercial, agricultural, and industrial settings. Essentially, it created the technology and tools used in sewage treatment plants, such as submersible pumps, which includes sewage treatment plants, seawater handling, firefighting, since it is a flame retardant cable, water well and deep well drilling, so they're even associated with the oil industry. But they also make microwave weapons, you know. Offshore drilling, rigs, artificial lifts, mine dewatering, and irrigation systems. Damn, feeding the planet too. Feeding the planet, making people into popcorn, just all sorts of crazy stuff. But how much are they worth? Let's check their pockets. ITT. Anyway, so ITT was associated with Otto von Bolschwing via Emanuel Fetinakis of the Fairchild Corporation, senior vice president, who had resigned International Telephone, yada yada. ITT had ties to the Nazis and right-wing regimes. As for the Nazis, on August 3rd, 1933, Hitler received its first meeting with U.S. businessman Stolsten's Ben, the then CEO of ITT, and his German representative Henry Mann. According to Sampson, 1973, ITT, through a subsidiary C. Lawrence AG, owned 25% of Focke-Wulf, the German aircraft manufacturer, builder of some of the most successful Luftwaffe fighter aircraft in the 1960s. ITT Corporation won $57 million in compensation for damage inflicted on its share of Focke-Wulf plant by Allied bombing during World War II. 1970, ITT owned 70% of CTC, the Chilean Telephone Corporation or company, now known as Movistar Chile. Movistar is owned by Telefonica SA, New York Stock Exchange's symbol TEF. Democracy Now! 2013. Democracy Now! 2013. Where was I at? In a conversation stated the following: ITT owned the telephone companies in Chile, owned the Sheraton Hotel. They were a very aggressive company in Latin America, and they decided they should have their own foreign policy. And they started pushing for meetings with the CIA. It helped that they had their own board of directors, a former CIA John McCone, and he was able to gain access to the CIA rather easily. There was more than 40 meetings between CIA officials and ITT officials. Damn. DeJamarin 2007 stated, in 2007, ITT was awarded a $207 million initial contract by the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, to lead a team to develop and deploy the Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast System. ABS is a key component of the FAA's Next-Gen Air Traffic Control Modernization Program, intended to increase safety and efficiency to meet the growing needs of air transportation. ITT is responsible for overall system integration engineering, and under contract options will operate and maintain the system after deployment through September 2025. So they're upgrading our FAA system. The ITT team includes its partners AT&T, Thales North America, WSI, SAIC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a private firm, which is one of the big four accounting firms in the world. So they do all the corporate auditing, books, stuff like that. Aerospace Engineering, Sunhio, ComSearch, MSC of Tampa, Pragmatics, the Washington Consulting Group, Aviation Communications and Surveillance Systems, Sandia Aerospace, and NCR Corporation. NCR. ITT, how much you worth? But they're only worth $2.5 billion. Sold your soul to those Nazis, man. You can't even reach like 5. Come on, man. Come on. Telefonica. How much are they worth? They're worth 48.7 billion euros. You know, they helped to overthrow the Chilean democratically elected person in Salvador Allende for Augusto Pinochet with the help of Milton Friedman, the CIA, and Henry Kissinger and whatnot. LG Harris, how much are they worth? Oh man, they ain't even gonna tell us. Oh, actually, here we go. 17 billion US dollars. Now we on that. Okay, now this to go to Howard Hughes. Companies, powerful companies that exist today that absorb Howard Hughes' companies and divisions are Raytheon, which comes from Howard Aircraft, which helped build the Galileo telescope, air-to-air missiles, NASA lunar equipment, the H-4 Hercules, Stinger missiles, AT&T, and DirecTV from Hughes Electronics, Delta from Hughes Air West. They used to own also TWA, I believe. L3 Harris from the division of Hughes Microwave Tube Division, Boeing, which absorbed Hughes helicopters, AC Delco, parts of Hughes Electronics, and GM bought them for car parts. Baker Hughes comes from Hughes Tool Company. So Baker Hughes, that's a big oil company. Palomar Technologies comes from Howard Aircraft Technologies Products Division, creating automated wire and die bonder equipment. Okay, cool. Nexstar Media Group acquired Hughes radio stations, KLOS TV, a CBS affiliate, I assume in Las Vegas. Also, he used to own the Venetian and Sands casinos. The former properties were in part acquired by Sheldon Adelson, i.e. Trump's mega donor. Oh, Trump's draining the swamp. No, he ain't draining no swamp. Donald Trump was produced by the swamp. Two swamps came together, created a vortex. Somebody did some voodoo, threw in a cheeseburger and some speed and some crack, and Donald Trump came out. And Howard Hughes Corporation, a real estate firm that builds master plan communities. Damn, master plan communities, technology, microwave weapons, and everything. How much is Raytheon worth? 27 billion. You know, yeah, you up there, you in the club, man. Baker Hughes, 22 billion. AC Delco, they ain't gonna even say. I'm sure it's a lot. Car parts, get out of here, you know. And I think, so I can keep going because I even talk about Operation Paperclip in college is what I call it. So a lot of these Nazis, they ended up just going to be college professors. For example, we have Adolf Bussmann of the University of Colorado, who is notable for ceramic tiles on the NASA shuttle. So those ceramic tiles that can take a lot of heat. Who else we got over here? Operation Paperclip in college. You are late to class. To the oven. We have Ernest Eckert, University of Minnesota, mechanical engineering. and coined the term the Eckert number in fluid dynamics. We have Conrad Johannes Karl Buntner, University of Washington, go Huskies. Uh, Meteorology and physiology. He probably helped to study like hypoxia. Probably just like when you're up in high altitudes, you can lose consciousness. Uh, Friedwart Winterberg of the University of Nevada, Reno, theoretical physics. I guess he was trying to conjure damn Castle Wolfenstein demons or something. We got Kurt Levohek, University, Southern California, pioneered integrated circuits. Pretty important. Who else we got over here? Operation. Oh, so this is a little different section. So I just told you Operation Paperclip in college. Now we're graduating, and now we're going to Operation Paperclip in SoCal, Southern California. Who we got over here? We have Croft Arnold Enrique, who lived in La Jolla, California. He worked for Convair and Bell Helicopter, and these companies are living today as Textron, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin. We have Herbert Alois Wagner of Newport Beach. Oh, so where are all these skinheads just popping up in Huntington Beach and surf Nazis and shit like that? I don't know. Maybe because we imported Nazis there. Richard Vogt worked at Boeing in Santa Barbara. And then so I'm going to say this probably for another post, but this actually is a little more analysis of the what I call the SoCal complex. I actually analyze like defense contracts and whatnot, the amount of spending that actually happens in Southern California, and I actually correlate that with like surfer, like Nazi culture and whatnot. So that'll be a fun one, guys. That's coming up soon. Walt Disney, everybody know Walt Disney was racist. Iran Contra. So yeah, guys. Whew. So like I said, I'm gonna end this. J.D. Salinger and the Nazis. He was a CIC agent. He was a low-level guy, but people like Henry Kissinger were not. And Henry Kissinger was mentioned in CIA documents by Michael C. Ruffner in an analysis on Ukrainian nationalists after World War II who were incorporated into stay-behind units. Henry Kissinger knew all this was going on. He was a Jewish guy. Did he care the Nazis got out? Probably not. Which calls into question a lot. And I mean, and it's controversial stuff, The Holocaust did happen. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying Israel's right to exist, and I'm not hating on the Jewish people at all. What I'm just saying is that there's bad people on both sides, and just the marginalize it to be like, well, there's just some bad people and they're not so bad. No, this is the type of people who run the world type bad. And they're not giving love to no one. So I started this off with J.D. Salinger, and like I said, J.D. Salinger was not some mind control book. I literally think that everything I've just been talking about this last hour and a half, those were the phonies he was talking about. Those are the people he's talking about. He's talking about, he probably couldn't even comprehend what was going on. He just felt it. You just have that existential feeling of something's kind of happening in the atmosphere. And I think because of his role with the CIC and being so privy to what was going on, I kind of feel that is the reason why I became so pessimistic and withdrawn from the world. But at the same time, J.D. Salinger, though, too, kind of has this weird kind of past with like young women. And so does Nabokov have relationships with all these young women and whatnot. And what does that harken on in the modern day? It harkens on Jeffrey Epstein. What was Jeffrey Epstein into? He was into MIT and science, the science seminars, and Bitcoin bros, and Bill Gates, and all this type of stuff. Like it's happening. It's like power is externalizing itself for the first time, or somebody slipped up bad and the curtain fell and we just witnessed, and from 2016 to 2020 to the present, what really goes on when people shuffle behind the scenes, and then they have to do some sort of intermission to pretend, hey everybody, you didn't see that, Donald Trump did this today. That's how the world runs. I love the United States. I ain't trying to hate on nobody, but like people aren't stupid. I don't consider myself a stupid person. I consider myself pretty aware, hyper aware. One of the reasons I feel like I have a responsibility to make this video because you don't see people like me really making videos like this. You typically always just kind of see I hate to say it, just angry white boys making videos. I don't hate white people at all. I ain't trying to clown on them or nothing, but it's just kind of like they just want to blame the Jews. Really? Really? They're the only ones responsible for all this? No, they are not the only ones responsible. It is a cabal. It is a bunch of different groups, you know, and arguably a lot of them probably look like the people who follow Alex Jones, who's a deep state asset in and of himself. I don't hate Joe Rogan. I'll probably read something I wrote on him soon on here. I call it "Is Joe Rogan a Neoplatonist?" Where I go into the philosophy of his beliefs, basically, whether he knows them or not. He's arguably an asset. Over here, always hanging out with special forces people, always talking about police, blue lives matters type stuff like that. But he can kind of play it cool because he smokes weed and he's cool. He'll invite some black people on, stuff like that. Asian lady. He's not racist or anything. I don't think he's a bad dude. But I think that like that show is in operation to a certain extent. Like you just don't have a military person or CIA person on your show without like that person getting permission to be on that show. It's not like, oh, I was just kicking it, man, grabbing a cheeseburger, and I just stopped by Joe Rogan's podcast. It was not like no. I can still be entertained by it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't mean I necessarily trust everything coming from it. Man, guys. But anyways, I got a lot of stuff to do, but I'm gonna finish my white noise analysis here soon. Somebody asked me for it when I was talking about the airborne toxic event and how it kind of relates to the coronavirus. Didn't hear anybody really talking about that online, so I'm to it. I'm on it, baby. Postmodern fiction and all that type of stuff. Like I really went down the rabbit hole after 2016 and whatnot, but it wasn't because like I was going down the rabbit hole because like the internet or nothing. It was like I had read all these books before in my youth and my college years and stuff like that, and it just activated. I was like, I have a responsibility to make these videos, like to make this video. Basically, like it would be a travesty, even if it. I probably won't get 10 likes. I probably won't get any likes or something. You know what I'm saying? It'd be nice if I do, but I probably won't. You know, who knows what's going on in the YouTube algorithm and shadow banning and stuff like that. Maybe what I'm saying is too real, but I don't hate anybody. I wish you all the best, whatever you are, whoever you are, wherever country you're from, man. Peace be to all. Love be to all. And, but like I said, bro, woo, JD Salinger, man, was up there, dude. This is why I think he went recluse, man. He couldn't just come out and say this shit. He couldn't just come out and be like, yo, man, I was hunting Nazis and the damn CIA and my good old boy officer was letting these fools off the hook and stuff like that. He would have been got, done, disappeared. He was probably nervous. He was probably scared. Even if he didn't need to be nervous, he probably just was nervous just because of what he knew. And that's honestly the tragedy of J.D. Salinger. But honestly, that is the beauty of this book, A Catcher in the Rye. And I wish I had some quotes from it highlighted. I didn't pencil this one to death like I do in my other books. But one thing you should also notice about this book is that I believe that Holden Caulfield's older brother, where did he go? I think according to Holden, I think if I remember correctly, he went to Hollywood. And I think somewhere I read somewhere that they alluded to don't I don't know if this is real or not. I think his older brother was a male escort in Hollywood. What does that remind you of? L.A. Confidential. Like I'm saying, all this stuff is connected, man. Even his psychiatrist attempts a move on him, abusing his power and authority over an innocent child. What did J.D. Salinger know? Was he a victim himself who had this lifelong addiction afterwards to young people? And he can only manifest it by perpetually being stuck in a childlike state in order to manifest his wartime experiences through a passive aggressive way through a character like Holden Caulfield, who is essentially a nihilist, a young nihilist who just is lost without purpose, existentialism, our beautiful teenage existential years, but you grow up. And I'm not sure if Salinger ever really did, but I think that he found some peace and solace in his life. I know that he got into yoga and meditation and whatnot. But just to sum this up, Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger and the Nazis, The Beast Reawakens by Martin A. Lee, White Noise by Don DeLillo, The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick, Hitler's Jewish Soldiers by Brian Mark Rigg, Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon, Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, 9 Stories by J.D. Salinger, and the collaboration How Hollywood Helped Hitler by Brian Irwand of Harvard University. I almost can create a class. I could create a class on this. I could start off with literature to modernism to postmodernism, and then I can go into all this stuff about corporations and Nazis and all this, because it all links up. And if you're hyper aware to it, you can see it. It's been under our noses the entire time. But I want to say, guys, thank you for your time. I'm new to this, but I ain't done yet. J.D. Salinger, thank you for your service. I don't know what you knew. I hope you died in peace and didn't break any laws or do any perverted, freaky stuff. And people like this, there's a special place in hell for them. People who butchered innocent people. People who profited from and didn't even care. Helen Von Damme. Oh, but it's the Jews. No, don't even start that here. That's what you want to believe for your ego. Because you need that for yourself. I don't need that. Klaus Barbie. Those people demanded. Those people needed to see court and to be thrown in jail for the rest of their lives and stuff like that. But they got let off the hook, and now people like me are making videos. So thank you for your time. Peace be with you. Stay safe in this coronavirus situation. Wash your hands. Actually be kind of responsible. At least wear a mask or a bandana or a scarf or something. You know what I'm saying? Because honestly, the more people who say screw it is probably more of a justification to keep us bunked up in our houses. So if you want to go to the beach, you want to have the selfie, just be responsible. Thank you. Bye.